been completed in the unit by Professor John Fairweather, where he looked at the science systems and people's attitude to science and innovation and what were the factors behind innovation across the small countries that we've talked about today that we think we should emulate. And what stood out for me from the results that came out of that compared to these other countries, we were good in a lot of the statistics, we were good in a lot of the attitudes, except New Zealanders did not seem in the same way to appreciate education or science.
I wonder how we rate that. What do you think about that, Sean? How do we measure that, do you think?
How do we measure that? You just did, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess I...
But what do you do? I mean, you survey people? Don't people say, oh gosh, yes, science is very important, whatever?
Well, clearly from the results that John came up with, New Zealanders didn't say that as much as other countries, and it really did come through very strongly.
I think one of the things is about science communication. So scientists do need to get out there and talk to people and talk to the public and communicate and tell people about the value of science. We are unusual in this country that we have a lot of our scientists working in Crown Research Institutes, which are commercially driven organisations, and they don't necessarily make it easy for scientists to get out there and talk to the public. And so I think we can improve on how we do that.
I think it's a key issue. I think that if you think about the challenges that Derek talked about before, there's going to be a lot of new technologies over the next 10, 20 years to cope with the challenges that lie ahead. Technologies are developing faster and faster and faster. We've seen in the case of the GM debate in New Zealand how technology was developed in isolation from the community understanding where and why and what it meant. We cannot have technology development without the social sciences that go alongside it and the kind of dialogue that this Transit of Venus forum that's going on in Gisborne at the moment is about, which has created true hybrid dialogue between the science community and the general community. Otherwise, we'll have a series of situations where technologies are developed, are feared, or are inappropriately adopted when they should not be adopted. And so that we do, because technologies are going to come at such a pace, faster and faster pace, and the isolation of the technological sciences from the social sciences has been, I think, a sad history in the last 20, 30 years.
GM is a very interesting example, of course, because there are some people who would say, yes, that way prosperity lies. There are other people who would say exactly the opposite, that if we continue to refuse having GM in New Zealand, we will add to our prosperity in the future because we will be able to offer a particular branding that's consistent with our existing branding. So it's not necessarily a science that we may need.
That's precisely the point. Science can provide knowledge. At the end of the day, communities provide values. Science has to work within a value system of ethics and so forth. But at the end of the day, it's not for the scientific community to opine which technology should be adopted or not. That is for the community to opine, but the community needs to be informed so it can make judgments based on knowledge as well as its values, not just on belief alone.
And do you think we're hampered in that kind of understanding? Is that the basic issue?
We don't get a good debate going, and I think the GM's a really good example. It got very polarised very quickly. And it was looking at the technologies, consumers were concerned about that, and the technologies that were offered at the time didn't seem to offer any consumer benefits. So if you're a bit nervous about a technology and you don't see what it's doing for you, maybe some of the new biotechnologies that are coming forward, so climate-friendly grass, may well offer those benefits that make it more acceptable for our consumer markets. But we've got to keep that dialogue going, and we've got to do information. And I guess the other sort of worry I have about the culture within New Zealand, and in particular the agricultural sector, is we've been based on preferential access, blame the POMs, I say, into the UK Primark, but it's developed a culture where we don't think about our markets as much as other countries do and consider the attributes and the types of products that they want and are willing to pay the premium price for.
Which comes back really to what some people say, and I think, Sir Peter, you have said it, that New Zealand it should be a clever, small country. Paul Callaghan himself said, we don't do big very well. We try to do it, but we don't do it very well. We should, I can understand you saying, Carolyn, remain small and nimble.
Yeah, but I think there's sort of three things there. If I was thinking about the agricultural sector, there's times when you want to niche market. There's times when you want to go for a specialist value added, like special biscuits. So there's room for all. And I like the thing that was raised this morning, and sorry if you missed it, where they said it's not or, it's and. So we need those, but also for our big products that we do try and play big, such as dairy or the meat sectors, we need to get the best prices we can in the markets with the attributes that those people want, which is safety, quality, things we do exceptionally well, but also growingly, even in our emerging markets, environmental quality, social sustainability, and the other things that we as New Zealanders value and want.
You see, Derek, I was thinking about you also with this idea of big. We don't do big very well. What do you think about that? You've been outside. You've looked at New Zealand from the US perspective. How do you see New Zealand going forward?
So most of the things I'm involved in are smaller organisations, right? Startup organisations. When I look at the big organisations that we have, like Fonterra, they're the only ones that really have any scale to try and do something different. And I don't think they have, well, they previously haven't had the boldness to try and do anything different. And so we've got this one big lever, and yet we're not even using it, right? We're not even using it to move up the value chain. And these are all things about, becoming more wealthy.
It's hard to knock Fonterra at this particular point in our economic history, Because, well, thank heavens for Fonterra.
Sure,
because we've been going straight down the plug hole without it.
That's even more to the point. If we didn't have, this commodity price, which was nothing, we had nothing to do with it. We didn't create it, okay?
We are price takers.
We just took it. So if it didn't happen, where would we be? We would then be in what someone referred to earlier today called a burning platform, right? We would then be in a situation where maybe someone would start making some actual seriously bold decisions. So doing big well, Fonterra probably does what it does really well, but what it needs to be doing, it probably doesn't do anything of. So that's from a commercial perspective, right? It needs to be, we all said it, going up the value chain, etc. From a responsibility perspective in the coming decades, it needs to be able to help the world feed itself more efficiently, more effectively. It needs to be able to go into other markets and export our knowledge to help countries which are struggling to deal with their growing populations and use our technology and our smarts. And that's kind of the export network that they should be building up as opposed to just shipping milk powder. So that's my view on one of the largest organizations we've got. My view on the next tier down of everyone in New Zealand and the listed companies, etc. They don't. If you look at the boards, it's quite representative, I think, of the problem. There's no scientists, there's no innovation, there's no young people, there's no women. And so I've stuck my hand up and said, I'm interested in being a part of this debate. I'm interested in being part of these boards. I think I have a bit of value to add. I look at the world from the outside in, and I'm told that there's actually pretty much no chance because I've never run an organization that's got 1,000 people. And so if that's the way we're assessing how we put people on boards, then there's really not a lot of hope for expecting any systemic, step change, bold movement, in these kind of companies.
Everybody's nodding their heads off around you. I think that you'll be on a board tomorrow by that. Everybody agrees with that.
I think this issue of expertise on New Zealand boards and getting a diversity of viewpoint is critical. One of the things New Zealand has not done well is have conversations from a diverse set of viewpoints, of clever viewpoints, but different viewpoints, which can help address problems. We tend to use the same cluster and the same conversation repeatedly out of context. I think one of the dangers we have in our economy is that we're not diversified enough. What if foot and mouth disease hit New Zealand? Where would we be? Just think about that's probably the biggest single risk this country has to its future is a disease affecting our dairy herd, which limits our exports of milk. We must diversify, but at the same time, we must create the dairy sector in such a way that a diverse range of companies and inputs go into it and out of it. At the moment, we're not, because again, no matter how good the management of one company is, it doesn't bring a diverse set of innovative thinking. We need more diversity in our thinking.
But you're a scientist, right? What the
so.
hell do you know about economics? I mean, this is what, again, Paul Callaghan found economics absolutely fascinating, and towards the end of his life, he went off and he sort of talked to economists, and he wrote from Walter Wesser, and he got right into it. But essentially, what do you guys know? Don't you get that a lot? Leave the economics to the politicians and to the
sorry,
the economists and just start.
Did that work for us the last few years?
Science and knowledge are accepted as a fundamental underpinning of all the small advanced economies and the larger economies too. So I think scientists who have engaged with the political, the policy, and the economic and the business world have got a lot to contribute and have contributed a lot to understanding. For example, and I'll turn it around the other way. 10 years ago or 20 years ago, mainstream economic theory thought that humans were rational beings. And everything was designed around the presumption of rational decision-making. It's been the science of psychology and the science of decision-making theory that has led to a new wave of economics, which understands that most people make decisions at the individual level based on emotion and intuition and a set of inherent biases. It changes totally the way microeconomics works. Now, I don't know, Carolyn may comment more, but...
No, I'd agree entirely. And I think, it's by working across and Peter listening to what's happening in the economics profession and me listening to what's going on in the science profession and the developments there. And it's about this cross-collaboration and this talking. And just picking up on a comment before, if you look at two of what I would call our exemplar industries, or one of them's in a bit of a sad state at the moment, which is the wine industry, where we earn the highest premiums on the international markets for our wines. The other one is Zespri. Now, bless them, they've got PSA, which is horrible, but just put that aside for a minute. Zespri get twice the world price for their kiwi fruit, and they're dominant in the world market. Why? Because they look very carefully at their marketing strategies, what the consumer wants. They have a commercial board which brings that outside perspective back, and it took a crisis to get that. I am terrified about what's going to happen in the milk sector because we think we're big, we're not, we're tiny. And as, for example, the EU removes its internal production quota, its supply is going to swamp the world markets, and we have to be ready for that. We have to be ready for prices to at least stabilise or start coming down. And so this is why we need, as Peter says, lots of different companies, lots of different expertise, lots of different marketing strategies, and try and getting twice the world price for milk powder when it hits off market because of our good qualities such as safety, quality, and our environmental sustainability.
Peter, you have called us complacent in the past, and I suggest that one of the reasons we are complacent is we see the swelling population of India and the swelling population of China, and we think we'll always have a market for milk and protein. We will have no shortage of markets. What is wrong with that? Why can't we just relax, for God's sake?
Well, we could massively increase our milk production. It's possible to do it. We could double our milk production on the number of cows we have now. It would be a challenge to our environment. It would be a challenge to a number of our concepts. But if we increase the feed available to our dairy cows, we could double the amount of milk we produce. But there's big buts around that. There's environmental costs. There's all sorts of issues and challenges which would need technological solutions. On the other hand, as Caroline's just said, there's a price problem out there unless we differentiate in some way. Now, we're able to differentiate, and I think we can differentiate much further. One of the last discussions I had with Paul was about the fact of the increasing interest in developing nutraceuticals and regulator-approved, validated, not just claimed, but actually proven health benefits for food-derived products. This is the biggest investment being made by some of the international players in the food industry. We've got an outstanding medical and health sector. We've got an outstanding food science sector. We've got an outstanding primary production centre. And we've got lots of very clever people. We should be thinking about the market which in Asia for food, for advanced foods, with a regulator-approved health claims accepted. There's added value, science-based added value from our primary sector and diversified away from just bulk commodities. And I think we're being a little unkind on Fonterra. Fonterra has developed a lot of high-value products, and if we just look at another one of the milk companies, Tartua's production of lactoferrin shows what very high-value products can be developed from milk. and sold at very high value internationally. We just need to do more of it.
And more companies. I mean,